right at 9 o'clock, or at 10 o'clock, sorry. And, but if you want to stay on and listen further, we can. So, and again, we'll give it about another minute here. We should have some bumper music or something, maybe in the background. Wonder what we could have for music for this type of session.
What's good pandemic music, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm sure we could. No, we shouldn't have people put that in the chat. It'll take us an hour to get through some of those.
Oh, yes.
Well, we're approaching 100 here, Mr. Chair, Pat Singh. So it's all yours, sir.
All right, 9:02, time to get started. Good morning, everyone. I am Pat Singh, and I am the current board chair. Glad you could join us this morning for an interesting and timely session. We are all faced with the necessity of revising our operations to guarantee safety and security of our tenants. At this critical point, building owners and managers are carefully examining the elements to provide the best air quality in office locations. Our presentation today will give some pertinent updates. We have just a couple of announcements to get to, and then we'll get started with the presentation. March is the month we normally hold for our annual resource fair, which is the opportunity for our service provider members to demonstrate their products and services to our membership. Because we still aren't able to congregate safely, the event committee is planning a different type of event this year. Think spring and think outdoors, which I think is fine for everyone. Planning is underway, and we will share more details when they're available. Our Engineers Association has a Zoom session scheduled in April 7th at noon regarding building code requirements and fire and life safety systems. Presenters will discuss design of fire system components and features to ensure a reasonable level of protection is provided to those in your building and its occupants. Registration is currently open for those with a burning desire to attend, and my apologies for that, by the way. Also in April, we hold our annual meeting and election of officers. Our keynote speaker will be Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. He will provide us with an up-to-the-minute report on the Chauvin trial, discuss public safety in general, and detail efforts by the city in partnership with the business community, including BOMA, helping with the rebound and rebuild of the Minneapolis business environment. This event will be via Zoom on April 15th, tax day, or former tax day, I guess. And looking forward to May, the Education Committee is planning a BOMA Ed on the topic of what we are learning from this pandemic and best practices to add to our playbooks for future pandemics. Lovely. We are currently confirming a panel of presenters from local property management, city representatives, and security contacts, and we'll be applying for 2 CEs for this virtual session on May 21st. Nothing that any of us want to miss. You will find current information on all our upcoming events on the BOMA ConnectEd website and newsletter. Excuse me, on the BOMA website and the ConnectEd newsletter. Okay, Kevin, let's get started with today's session, What the Tech.
All right, thanks, Pat. For today's meeting, we've been approved for 1 hour of continuing education credit. And just a reminder that you must remain on the session for the full presentation to earn credit. This session is being recorded and will be shared with our website afterwards. And we invite you to utilize the chat feature that Pat mentioned to present questions to our panelists. They will respond as best fit either during the presentation or during a Q&A period at the end of the session. So let's get moving on today's presentation titled What the Tech, Innovations in Building Operation. Large investments in improving a building's HVAC and filtration systems to reduce the spread of contaminants are a common initiative among our local buildings. At this critical point of reentry for tenants and their employees, building owners and managers are carefully examining every element necessary to provide the safest environments for tenants. I was on a call with a number of HR directors just 2 days ago, and this topic came up, and many of them felt very confident and comfortable what was being done, but they, like many of us, aren't the professionals that understand what is being done. So I think we're going to learn a lot of that today. Let me introduce the presenters that will be joining us today. First, Michelle Campbell is an Industrial Hygiene Program Director and Practice Lead for TRC. She has expertise in environmentally regulated materials, health and safety, and industrial hygiene consulting for public and private sector clients throughout the U.S. Howard Hoffman is a sales engineer with SVL. He started his HVAC career with Carrier Corporation in Syracuse and Orlando, and returned to Minnesota and joined Xcel Energy in 2010, working on their energy efficiency programs. Howard has been in his current role with SVL since 2018, focusing on owner-directed projects. And finally, Nick O'Reilly is Chief Engineer with Able Engineering for Piedmont's Suburban Portfolio. His expertise includes implementation of automation systems, bipolar ionization technology, and fire life safety systems, and has current experience with air quality systems and monitors currently in the market. We appreciate the efforts of our education committee in coordinating this topic and getting our panelists together. With that, welcome. I can't hear you applaud, but welcome Michelle, Howard, and Nick. And Michelle, can you start us off, please?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kevin. Good morning to everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So bear with me. Okay. Kevin, can you please just confirm that you're able to see that?
Hi, Michelle. Sorry, this is Riley. I dropped Kevin off. It is in your presenter mode right now, or your speaker view.
Okay, so we just gotta. Apologies, because this. Okay, so they swapped my screens, and of course, how's that? Any better?
Anything yet? Try clicking that one more time.
How about now?
Still on the same thing. If you want to stop your share, maybe, and
Try again.
yeah.
This is always a good start, right?
Always works in practice.
It really does. Percent of view.
There you go. Looks good.
Okay, looks good. All right. Well, thanks for bearing with me as we work through one of the actual new challenges since the pandemic. This is a good segue into what we'll be talking to today. We've all had to kind of tweak our technology skills. So today I'm going to be speaking to you about some of the protective measures and some of the implemented controls that we have started to see go into office settings in particular. As Kevin mentioned, I'm Michelle Campbell. I am a certified industrial hygienist. I've been consulting in the public health realm for about almost 20 years now on projects all throughout the US. With the pandemic, my focus prior to that used to be a lot on chemical exposures and infectious disease management for healthcare settings. And then due to the kind of floodgates opening with a lot of information resulting from COVID-19, I have switched my focus over the past year to start addressing some of the controls that we're starting to see specific to SARS-CoV-2. So that, with that being said, I just wanted to kind of give you a high-level overview of what we mean when we talk about implemented controls. So in the world of industrial hygiene, and all that means, industrial hygiene just means the study of worker exposures to various different hazards and contaminants. We have this hierarchy of controls, basically various different protective measures that we implement in order to reduce exposures. This can be reducing exposures to chemicals, but also reducing exposures to viruses. So the hierarchy has been implemented by OSHA. That's why we thought it was important to kind of just give you the general overview. The American Industrial Hygiene Association is the governing body for industrial hygienists and has been very, very active over the past year at implementing guidance documents and recommendations related to kind of reopening planning. So obviously the best option for us would be to completely eliminate our hazard. We would do that by complete social and physical isolation. That's not the world we live in. And for many contaminants, that's not really a viable solution. So we move to our next option, substitution. We can't substitute in a better virus than COVID, than SARS-CoV-2. So that doesn't really apply to us here. So really all we have left are the three remaining controls. That would be engineering controls, which is what Howard and Nick will be speaking to you after my presentation about. And then administrative controls and personal protective equipment. So we'll be going into those in a little bit more detail over the next few slides. So OSHA was enacted in the 1970s for the sole purpose of protecting workers' health and safety in the workplace. OSHA puts the responsibility on the employers for providing a safe and healthy workplace. And with that kind of core mission in mind, that's why they have been very, very active in the control of virus transmission as it pertains to our COVID-19 pandemic over the last year. So some new kind of and recently released information from OSHA. I guess something to know, OSHA does not usually move very quickly. They do not make changes very quickly. They are a very large and bureaucratic machine, so things take a long time to be pushed through. But just like anything else, COVID has really kind of changed things up. So what we've seen is with the change of the administration, there was an emergency executive order that was signed that was really putting emphasis on controls and virus control related to COVID-19. That kind of prompted OSHA, who I have to say was probably working on this document, guidance document, over the previous year, because as soon as that executive order was passed, they released a new and updated guidance document that has some very specific components that I'll talk about on the next slide. In conjunction with that, they have actually also launched a national emphasis program for the COVID-19 response actions. So they basically want to see that employers are actively reducing potential for virus transmission. So this actually just came about this month. Of particular interest to this audience would be some of the primary target industries. They would include medical and dental offices. And so what we are starting to kind of hear is that there are going to be more OSHA inspectors out there on the streets inspecting properties, and they are going to be looking under the OSHA general duty clause at many, many different safety aspects. So it's just something to keep in mind because OSHA was not previously very, very active as far as actual enforcement and inspection outside of heavy industry, really. So some of the key components of the new and improved guidance document that they released, it was posted on January 29th, 2021. The face covering mandate is complementary to and not a replacement for physical distancing. I have experienced that there is a misunderstanding about that. I've actually reviewed several COVID-19 reopening plans that have in there, if you can maintain 6-foot distance, then you do not need to wear your face covering. So it's just something, a slight difference that I think is important. There is no distinction between workers who are vaccinated. So as we vaccinate more of the population now, everybody is kind of getting the green light from the CDC to start gathering in smaller groups if they are fully vaccinated. However, as far as OSHA is concerned, that does not get around the engineering controls, the administrative controls, and the PPE recommendations, i.e. face coverings that they're recommending. So vaccinated or not, really doesn't make a whole lot of difference to OSHA as far as virus transmission itself. Employers are being asked to put together and implement COVID-19 prevention programs. Some of the key components of that would include conducting a hazard assessment. So that means looking at your specific facilities and operations and determining where the greatest hazards exist. What controls and measures are you putting in place to minimize virus transmission? And those are all the things that we're kind of talking about today. All of these are live links in this PowerPoint presentation. So I'm not sure if the plan is to share it, but if you click on, they will take you directly to OSHA's site. And they have some very, very detailed information there about how to put together and implement a very effective COVID-19 prevention program. So let's talk about kind of reopening buildings and returning to work. So as we start to return to the workplace, everybody is implementing the daily self-health check. So that means obviously making sure that anybody that is coming into your buildings is conducting their own at-home self-assessment first. Do I have any symptoms? Do I have a fever? Et cetera, et cetera. If they do, don't come into the building. We are seeing some of our clients taking that one step further and doing temperature checks and health questionnaires upon entry into the buildings, but this is not a kind of uniform, wide sweeping implementation for all clients. It seems to vary pretty significantly. I'll tell you, for my company in particular, to enter any of our offices, they do conduct a basic health check before they will permit you in. Again, requirement for masks and face coverings. There is a new ASTM method now that actually standardizes face covering requirements, because it's all over the place. You know, there's bandanas, there's many different versions of face coverings and masks. And so ASTM has stepped in with some, excuse me, more specific recommendations pertaining to that, making sure that we're implementing policies and practices with regards to social distancing. So that is minimizing space in collaboration spaces and break room spaces to discourage people from grouping together. We are seeing clients remove tables and chairs from communal break areas to kind of discourage people from doing that. In the warmer climate states, they're pushing some of those break areas outside and spacing them out, but not everybody has that luxury. And then lastly, we're looking at the overall improvement of the building's ventilation system, which you will hear more about today. So when we talk about administration controls or administrative controls, these are what we would consider the low-hanging fruit when it comes to industrial hygiene. This is kind of the common sense stuff. So think about frequent and thorough hand washing. I will tell you the preference from the regulatory agencies is hand washing over hand sanitizer. Hand washing is more effective, especially when we're dealing with a virus that has a kind of lipid, fatty outer layer. The soap is going to break that down, and then it's also just going to then be rinsed off. So definitely encourage frequent hand washing, and we've been recommending just posting more signage to promote that in your buildings. Making sure sick workers know that they can stay home. You know, pre-COVID, I have been guilty of going into the office when I've had maybe a cold or a slight sniffle, and those days are long gone. I think we've all learned that that's not the way to go. Making sure that we provide the means for your tenants and staff to have good personal hygiene. So that's kind of tissues and closed lid trash receptacles, some of the basics. And then alternating days and shifts to reduce the total occupancy. We're seeing that with custodial vendors where they're actually kind of switching off the cleaning activities and reducing the number of employees that they have on one particular shift so that we can keep those head counts a little bit lower. So that leads us into cleaning and disinfection. And there is an awful lot of talk about this and an awful lot of information out there. So all of the regulatory agencies, so that would be EPA, CDC, OSHA, all recommend that you implement a cleaning and disinfection protocol. This would be a simple written document that spells out the roles and responsibilities of your property team, so everybody knows what ownership they have in the program. It details what your routine enhanced cleaning protocols are. So the way we cleaned before is not the way that we clean today. There's a lot of talk about high touch surfaces, so think light switches, desktops, anything that we're frequently touching, door handles, things like that. And I am seeing overwhelming implementation of these routine enhanced cleaning protocols. Deep cleaning, which kicks in once we've had confirmed COVID-19 case and is a little bit more involved than just your routine enhanced cleaning. Having, quality control checks. It's always good to have third-party quality control checks, just having someone else coming in and taking a look to make sure that these protocols you're putting together are actually being implemented. And then some are going as far as doing actual post-cleaning verification testing. And that's usually after we've had what we call a cluster of cases. So we've had more than, 4 or 5 cases over a 2-week period in the same work area, which would imply or indicate that work-related transmission is a possibility. So the CDC recommends that we do a pre-cleaning with soap and water first. We talked about that with hand washing. Same principle applies. So a lot of the disinfectants that are effective against SARS-CoV-2 are not very effective on dirty surfaces, as ironic as that sounds. Disinfectants are not cleaning agents, they are disinfectants. So CDC would like to see us do general cleaning with good old soap and water and elbow grease. Following that, that's when we would then kind of go to application of a disinfection. We've kind of confirmed this. My company has done oversight and testing of cleaning and disinfection, and we have definitely seen through our data that the most effective protocol includes that pre-cleaning step and not just the application of disinfectants. So when we talk about kind of third-party oversight, cleaning and disinfection oversight and verification, there is now, when we first kind of jumped into this pandemic, there was not the technology, the lab analysis, the sample media to really support surface sampling that was very, very specific to SARS-CoV-2. I will tell you that that is now available. Lots of labs offer that analysis. It is very, very costly. and the fastest turnaround time you can get on virus-specific surface sampling is about 24 hours. So once the lab receives it, you're still going to have a 1-day delay. Not very practical when you're cleaning and you need to open a space up for tenants, costly. And so there's some pitfalls with that sampling protocol. So as a alternate kind of quick and dirty field test, we have gone to ATP testing. It is not an exact science. It has been used in the food and beverage industry a lot, and also the healthcare industry, to just get a feel for overall cleanliness. ATP testing is a type of enzyme testing where we swab surfaces. It is not virus specific. It just detects biological matter on a surface. So basically, if we have biological material accumulating on a surface that has just been cleaned, it kind of tells us that it was not cleaned in the best possible way. The problem is that there is no regulatory oversight of this instrument or the threshold limits that we use to determine clean versus not clean. So you'll find that the limits of cleanliness that are being implemented in the field vary significantly. And so it can be, again, it's a bit of an art form to interpret the data, and not as scientific as some of the other stuff that we would typically use in industrial hygiene. So what have we learned? We have done a significant amount of oversight of custodial vendors and cleaning contractors who are implementing these routine enhanced cleaning protocols. And so I wanted to share with you some of the lessons learned that we've seen just from observing how this has been done. And keep in mind, when we do the observations, we have already developed cleaning and disinfection protocols, so we know how they're being told to do it. We just want to make sure that the field teams themselves are correctly implemented those protocols, and they're carrying them out. It's very easy to get somewhat complacent. So what we found is a lot of the disinfectants we're using are very, very irritating to us as people, irritating to our skin and eyes, and can have some very nasty chemicals in them. And we are seeing that custodial staff is not being provided with the appropriate PPE they need, nor are they being trained on the hazards of working with those particular disinfectants. So that is something that can certainly be improved. Cloth rags are being used a lot just because we can launder them and it's cheaper than going through a gazillion paper towels. The rags are not being changed out frequently enough. We are finding that rags are being used in one area and then used in another area, which potentially can result in cross-contamination, or they're not saturating the rags or the towels sufficiently enough. In order for disinfectants to work, they have to be applied and stay wet. Every disinfectant has a varying what we call contact time. So the amount of time that it needs to stay wet on a surface in order for it to be effective. And we're seeing that those contact times and the saturation of those surfaces is not sufficient. And not all high-touch surfaces were captured. Again, think about cleaning pre-COVID. It was more light dusting, some vacuuming, cleaning of restrooms, and that has significantly changed. So these are just all things that I would pay attention to, and I've been kind of instructing those that ask to conduct their own internal checks, you know, just to kind of check in and make sure the protocols are being implemented properly. So the question of the hour, I suppose, to fog or not to fog. So we are seeing a tremendous amount of marketing that is really, really pushing application of disinfection, either via fogging, which is a fumigation method, or wide area spraying. I'll tell you that the American Industrial Hygiene Association, the CDC, and the EPA do not endorse those types of methods for application of disinfection products. As an industrial hygienist, it makes me a little crazy to think that anybody would walk into a commercial office building and spray disinfectant chemicals. As I mentioned kind of earlier, they can be very, very irritating to the skin. Some of the components that are used, the active ingredients in disinfectants, have high levels of toxicity to people. And so when we go in there and we aerosolize them and we spray them around a building, we are essentially introducing a chemical hazard to that building that did not exist before. So that's a concern for the workers and requires a higher level of personal protective equipment to make sure they're not being exposed to chemicals. But it's also a concern if you have sensitive tenants, you know, they have personal belongings on their desks. We want to avoid kind of impacting any of that with disinfectant products that could then lead to allergic reactions or sensitivities to individuals. What we've learned is that just application of disinfectants is not effective. The pre-cleaning really is where you get the most kind of bang for your buck. That's where we reduce virus loading on surfaces, is just by good old-fashioned elbow grease. So my advice, if it sounds too good to be true, if someone walks in there with their backpack and wants to spray your building and tells you that it's good for weeks or sometimes months, if it sounds too easy, it's probably not the way to go. Life is never that easy. And then as an industrial hygienist who's done a lot of indoor air quality assessment work, I make a living out of responding to people spraying chemicals in buildings. Tenants can be very sensitive. And I think in this particular world that we're living in now, their sensitivity is heightened. So I would advise against fogging or wide area application of any disinfectant for commercial office settings. So where do we go from here? Is everything going to go back to normal once we get vaccinated? No, I don't think so. The industry in general does not think so. All the research is indicating the way things are now as far as implementing these routine enhanced cleaning, requirements for kind of limiting gatherings, things like that. They're here to stay. You know, COVID-19 is the pandemic that we had now. Sadly, there are many viruses out there. And that's, I guess, the wonderful thing about biology is that it's also constantly evolving. So we have to always be prepping and ready for the next pandemic. So I don't think these protocols are going to go away. And the fact that OSHA is actively implementing them, I think, is confirmation of that. So tenants' perspective on what a clean space is has changed drastically. And I don't think that's ever going to go back to the way it was. So essentially, I guess what the short version is I think all of this is here to stay. And I think it's a good investment of time and money to implement good programs now. And that's all I have for you for the implemented controls. And I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I'm not a great multitasker, so if there are questions, like it might be best to let either I can answer them now or we can wait till the end.
There was one question, Michelle, that came through.
Yeah.
And it is, with CDC allowing 3 feet for students in schools, will this affect offices as well?
I don't think so. And the reason being is because children in the age groups where they are allowing that have actually made up less than 10% of the documented COVID-19 cases. So this has never really hit children in the same way it has affected adults, which has also given them that comfort factor of reducing the physical distancing requirement. So I don't see that being implemented anywhere outside of schools. And you can already see that the pushback that they're getting in schools from making that slight change. A lot of the teachers unions are really having a hard time with that because, again, the kids are making up a very small component of affected cases, whereas the adults are actually the ones at higher risk. So I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Our second question came in, Michelle, and it said, do you have an opinion on elevator capacities or protocols?
So it really depends, obviously, on square footage. I'll tell you, whatever you implement, people are terrible and they don't follow them. I would say it really depends on the airflow that you can get inside the cabs, and also obviously the square footage. Most commonly, we are seeing limits of, 2 people only, which is going to really create a traffic jam if you get everybody coming back to the office. But I don't think it would be a terrible thing to force people to use the stairs more either. But we're definitely seeing, sadly, like many things, people are not following those rules. Like they are, I was just in an elevator and the signage clearly said 1 person only. And this person jumped in and asked me if I didn't mind. And it was a bit too late to get out at that time. Okay, any other questions?
That is all we have right now.
Awesome.
Keep you posted with the more that come through at the end.
Perfect. I will hand it over to you, Howard. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Myself, Howard Hoffman, and Nick O'Reilly, who introduced earlier from Pat, will be kind of going over healthy buildings during COVID and more of the operational side and kind of some of the technologies that are available to building owners and kind of all facilities, what they might want to do moving forward. Nick, I'll hand it over to you to start us off.
Sure. I'm just going to touch on some general HVAC. We talk about system design for 1% extremes. That means basically they're designed to operate and make temperature set points on the hottest days of the summer and the coldest days in the winter. And typically on either side of that spectrum, they provide about 10% of outside air, of total airflow is outside air. Tenants asking questions about, typically tenants pretty much only care in the past if someone was hot or cold, but now we're seeing them ask more questions more than ever about our operation, asking us to fill out forms from their corporate and things we are doing in response to the current pandemic. Another question that Michelle kind of touched on too is, from our aspect, is will vaccines and herd immunity be enough to make tenants feel comfortable in coming back to these buildings with the things that we're doing and the things we're doing with these systems? And some companies may take a view of basically waiting to see where people's comfort levels are, but I guess we're all asking that question. The things the overarching themes that we're going to talk about, what's being done and looked at on HVAC systems is fresh air, system filtration, UV and ionization, space filtration, and monitoring. So I'm going to primarily compare the application of these things to break these into 2 groups, the ones on the left and the right, the small individual systems and the large centralized systems, specifically the water source heat pumps and the large central air handler units, because that's what I've been working with. So we look at fresh air capabilities for the heat pump type systems, and they are very limited. Basically, there's a unit on the roof sized and ductwork is sized to bring a certain amount of outside air in, and typically it's 10%. Somewhere around there, and that's pretty much the max. There's not much that you can do with that besides that. On some of the larger systems, like the centralized air handler systems, when it comes to fresh air, there can be much more capability. I can see buildings that I deal with, we can have 5 times the amount of fresh air brought in per square foot on a system like this versus the smaller heat pump type system. And in regarding the energy with the outside air, because there's not much you can do with the heat pump type system, it's kind of neutral, but obviously if you're going to bring in a ton of outside air with one of these big centralized air handlers, you're going to have higher energy costs on conditioning that air and how you want it. On the unit filtration side, the heat pumps are limited. We've talked about this. You really can't go higher than a MERV 8 on these units. It disrupts the refrigerant cycle in their operation. Where on these bigger air handler units, we've seen that we've gone to be able to go to a MERV 14 type filter. I'd say I've seen 4 or 5 different air handlers in recent history that I've done personally that we did that and really didn't have any operational problems. Space filtration, I can let Howard touch on that when I get done with the next 2 pieces, because I don't deal with that much besides HEPA filters for light construction. So ionization or UV, I'm going to mostly talk about ionization. What I found, if you compare a heat pump type building to a central air handler type building, per square foot, what I found is the material cost is at least twice as much, and also at least 4 times as much for labor hours. And that is utilizing our in-house engineering. That was not contracting it out. So it's a much higher cost for the heat pump type building versus the air handler. That's what I've seen. And then monitoring. So monitoring can be done for all these systems, either based on some kind of automation, or what I have been dealing with is we have indoor air quality monitors that give us real-time data on things like total VOCs, formaldehyde, particulate matter, CO, CO2, and a host of others. We've performed some testing on some of these, and it's actually pretty cool to see it react. I feel like some of the results from the testing that we have done has been a little bit tampered down just because of the current situation. Low occupancy, HVAC systems, operating less than 100% because of the occupancy. In some cases, low construction activity. All those things, even maybe pollution outside from less cars being, all those things are affecting what our indoor air quality, what we're seeing. So I actually look forward to when it comes to a more normal situation, and we can do some more testings and really analyze the data of these things and see more in a normal operating situation. And this is something that we could possibly share with our tenants if we're comfortable with that, and show them that, hey, we're doing these things, and here's the data to back it up.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I'll go into a little bit on the space filtration and what we've seen from the SBL perspective. A year ago, when all this started, the requests that we got for how can I help my space, how can I clean my space, what are my options, a lot was focused on the dental world. And I remember touring most around Minnesota, helping out various dentists and oral surgeons. How do we get them back open again? And a lot of that came down to space filtration. They were trying to leave their large mechanicals as best they could, and basically affect just the given spaces where they had their clients coming in, where they're actually doing various procedures. So a lot of that comes down to just the overall filtration side. What can you do as far as filters go? Most buildings, when you first are constructed, you're sitting at probably that MERV 2, 3, 4 range, just kind of a standard throwaway that's there to catch the really big dust that's created from sanding drywall and everything else that goes on when a building is constructed. Those get thrown away, and you probably move to about a MERV 6, 7, 8 for your standard filters on a quarterly basis, or depending how big your filter banks are to change out. The best way I like to describe it is your lower MERV rating catches grapefruits. As those are flying through the air, it can catch a big grapefruit, but all the baseballs and grapes and apples, all that stuff can fly straight through. As you increase your MERV rating to an 8, 9, 10, 11, up to the 14s, 15s, and then obviously up to HEPAs, which is like a medical grade, you can catch pretty much anything you want to. The seeds of a grape, the seeds of a strawberry, all that stuff can now be caught by that filtration. Obviously, the downside with those are in the higher energy that you might get, you're creating more static pressure in your system. As Nick mentioned, water source heat pump buildings, small rooftops, there's generally not a lot of excess fan capacity on those spaces. So you don't have the power within those fans to keep the air movement that you need in the space and create the cooling that you want or heating for the space, because that filter is adding so much pressure to your system. When you get to the big built-up systems, that's generally not as big of an issue. You still have to be concerned about it, but typically there's a little bit more power behind those filters or behind those fans for the filtration to be upgraded a little bit, because they're expecting as filters get dirtier, they actually are more effective. And it's kind of an odd side of filtration. They also have the downside of the energy. So, quarterly maintenance on those to make sure that they're acting as best they can, filtering as best they can without having undue penalties to your fan side is a big part of it. So on those dental suites, we moved into space filtration. And there's several forms of space filtration that have come out. A lot were there before COVID started, and I'd say we've seen an influx of a ton of new technology and a ton of new products that are out there to fit in your given space. On the far left is kind of your standard in space. I don't know who's been to the dentist already this year or in the past year and I've seen a ton of dentists add small HEPA filters to the room that you're sitting in. Pretty straightforward, buy it on Amazon, buy them on Target, pretty inexpensive, easy filter changes, and just sits in the space. We've seen a lot of colleges, high schools, classrooms go to kind of these middle two options. They're basically large in-room fan HEPA filters. Take in air on one side, and then blow it through the other side, or take it in the bottom and exhaust it out the top. And it's truly just cycling air in the space. It doesn't affect your overall HVAC in any way. It's just moving the air around a little bit quicker. You get a breeze from them depending where you're standing. You can also add ionization to these. You can add UV to these. So there's a whole host of options. I'd say the downside is they're kind of ugly and they can get pretty big. The one on the bottom, the white, that's about 2 feet by 2 feet. There's a square and it's about 3 feet long, 3.5 feet long, depending on how much CFM you want to move. The two beige units are basically the size of a refrigerator. So it's not a small piece of equipment that you can put in a space. The final picture on the lower right is a fan filter unit. And this is what we've seen a lot of the dental suites going to, neurosurgery suites. We basically have created a negative pressure system within a building's HVAC overarching system for a given tenant. So a few oral surgeons and dentists have added a HEPA fan filter above the patient space. We balance that relative to the overall suite of theirs to make sure that we're not affecting any other tenants, but keep the pressure in that given operatory negative. So we're always sucking air into the door. So if a patient coughs or, while they're getting their teeth cleaned, they spit, whatever it might be, all that air is exhausted straight through that room, gone through a HEPA filter before it gets transferred to other spaces. So you're doing the best you can on the filtration side. We don't affect anything else from the building standpoint, which is nice. So a given tenant can do this improvement. You don't have to worry about the overall effects of what it might do to other tenants in the space. Oops, sorry, jumped back there. And then obviously all the new products that are out there. And I say new because I think they've all been around for quite some time in various forms. UV lighting on the lower left, there's various options for how you apply UV lighting. If you have a large air handler system, typically it's at the air handler downstream of the coil so that you can kind of get some effects from that. The blue in this middle is ionization. There are several companies who are out there for ionization, and depending on the type of systems you have, as Nick mentioned, the costs vary dramatically. When you have a lot of water source heat pumps or fan coils throughout your entire space, you have to go with a lot of small units, and labor really dominates the cost of those type of projects. When you get to bigger systems, you might use something like this would be a GPS iMod, where you can handle big air handlers at once. Then you're working the whole air handler side, but you might get less ions to your space. There's companies like Lumilier who have UV lighting that can be put into your hallways. It's a different type of UV, sits in the space, kind of reflected up. It does clean the air, does help. It kind of gives a weird blue glow at times, different hues to your space. So it actually affects just the ambiance of rooms. So, unfortunately, there's not a great solution. And if there was, I think whoever that person was that created the solution would be very well off at this point and moving on to the next pandemic. But there's not a great option that can take care of everything for you. Every building is unique, as I'm sure you guys all know, for the different buildings you own and manage. One site might require UV lighting, and the other sites might prefer ionization. It's just a change of what makes people comfortable. And the going back to the in-space filtration, the thing we've heard from our customers is they want something they can show their tenants. UV and ionization is great. There's all the studies to show how it works, but a tenant can't see that. A tenant can't feel that in any way. When they walk into a space, while they might be a little large, refrigerated size units for fan filtration at least shows that they're doing something. And you can point to, hey, here's one of the steps we've taken. Moving beyond that, and this kind of talks to a little bit of the CDC side as they come out and start questioning, hey, what have you been doing? I believe monitoring is key. I think most buildings nowadays have some sort of automated system. This is just kind of showing the WellStat system, which is basically an add-on to your existing. Nick has these at a few of his sites, I know. He mentioned they've got some great data on it. It's just kind of hard to tell because occupancy has been so low over the past year to see what's been the big benefit over that long term. But WellStats monitor a whole host of different VOCs, and you can, obviously besides temperature and humidity, they get to the VOC side of what's going on in my space. As people around, they kick up stuff from older carpet versus new carpet, all those different things. A well stat can monitor that, and there are other systems out there as well that can do the same thing. But I think that'll help create, as tenants ask, what have you been doing? Okay, we've installed these well stats, or we've installed a system like that. You can see them on the wall. Here's the reports we're getting for your specific area or for your specific floor. I think those are the type of things that property managers have been asking us for and are using as a kind of a marketing tool moving forward. Say, here's what we've done. When you have questions, we can show you this data. Obviously, there's, I think, risk at times when you start showing that data, but it's better to be transparent and show what you are capable of providing them information-wise, compared to trying to, sweep stuff under the rug. And that's been our big change, is just getting into spaces and helping show what's out there and let them monitor and use the data. And a lot of companies have started using it as a marketing tool, I kind of previously mentioned, to show here's what we're doing to help out our customers. So as Michelle mentioned, unfortunately, this won't be the last one that comes through. Hopefully the next iterations aren't as dramatic as this one has been the past year. But I think as any new virus strain hits, there'll be a big hype around it, and buildings will probably react, and tenants the same well, as far as what can we do next and how can we move forward to keep our tenants safe, to keep our buildings healthy, and keep people comfortable being back together. Moving on to questions, I know there's two that have come in. It says, Nick, you mentioned MERV 14 and is shown on Howard's chart. Do you see filtration levels becoming a regulated requirement, or maybe a broadcast point like lead levels?
I think, I don't know about requirements. I could see it definitely being, a marketing piece. It'd be easy. It'd be easier if you could apply a MERV 14 filter to everything you had. So you could go back and say that every building that we have in our portfolio has MERV 14 filtration, and that'd be a nice thing to say, but it's just, right now, it's just not a reality to do, given these systems. As for a regulatory requirement, I have no idea. I don't have an answer to that question.
And I
think
be the person that always butts in, sorry. I mean, Ashray, who is heavily involved in governing how we engineer and operate ventilation systems, has put in writing that their recommendation is MERV 13 or greater as a result of COVID-19. So not a regulatory agency, but considered to be really kind of a governing agency and really the gold star for air conditioning and refrigeration in general. So that is a recommendation that they have out there.
Here's another question for you, Michelle. Are products like nanoseptic films effective?
So nanotechnology in general is fascinating, and it is very, very promising. So nanoseptic films, and I've looked at some of these products, have been kind of implemented in operating rooms and healthcare, but more for single-use kind of medical devices. They are effective for that kind of world. I'm not sure how that gets implemented into an environment that is not a sterile environment. So, think about an OR. We have surfaces that are stainless steel. For the most part, everything is non-porous. I think it's a completely different environment to your average commercial office space. And again, a lot of what I'm seeing, research, case studies, information that's available about the effectiveness of nanoseptic films is based more on the medical device side of things. And not necessarily for a broader implementation. I'm just not sure how you're going to determine when it's time to change them out. It just seems that sticking films over surfaces is not the way to go. I will kind of throw something out there that might be somewhat controversial to some, but virus transmission, it's no secret that person-to-person transmission is where our highest risk is. That's why it's critical to make improvements to your ventilation system, for instance. Surface transmission has become a much lower priority and concern and risk the more we learn about SARS-CoV-2. So yes, there is some level of risk, but there is risk to everything. But surface transmission itself is not really considered to be the way that the virus is transmitted. So I think going to the extent of implementing something like nanosectic films is just going way beyond what we would need to do. It is going to be impossible for you to create a sterile environment in an office setting, and that's not what we're trying to do. So I would advise that, you know, implementing some of what we talked about, kind of the low hanging fruit is the way to go. It's cool technology. I just don't really see a use for it outside of the medical world right now, unless they do some more kind of research and figure out how they're going to implement it on a wider scale, more commercial scale. There was also a question above that. Typically when you guys do your monitoring for the ventilation systems, is the monitoring done in the return airstream, or is it done at specific points on the field?
I'll talk to specifically. Oh, go ahead, Howard.
Okay, we've seen both done. I think it depends on what type of tenant and secondly, what type of systems you have. If you're a water source, heat pump, fan coil type building where everything is basically recirculated in a given zone, to really know what's going on, you have to be at that level. If you're more of a large air handlers type system or large rooftops, you can at least start your monitoring at the main return and get the overall data of what's going on in the building. And then if you have higher levels of certain things, you can kind of start drilling down. That's where sort of a portable monitor can be useful to, hey, we're seeing extra formaldehyde in our system. You can kind of start checking various returns on different floors to see where that spike might be coming from, and then kind of drill down to what your source is. What you go, Nick?
No, I would agree. What we've done personally, it's been in the return airstream, and it's been, you know, if it's a larger floor plate, then we would have more than one, but it's mostly just monitoring our systems, basically, not specific tenant suites. But I think like these devices that we use at least communicate through a cellular modem. So it's not a lot more work to, you know, install them other places. You're not have to running, at least for this specific one we're using, you're not have to running wires all over the place. It all just gets mounted and it talks to our systems and reports data back.
Another question came in, ionization/UV has obviously become more popular during COVID. Can you provide basic definition of ionization/UV process and how effective is ionization? So ionization is basically emitting positive and negative ions into your airstream. Those positive and negative ions attach themselves to the opposite charge in your airstream, whatever it might be. When it comes to viruses, basically they kind of pull apart the virus and deactivate it or kill it. So it can't be harmful. One of the things that you might notice when ionization first goes in, is I noticed at my house, and I know others in our office have had the same experience. The first time it goes in, the first week and a half, your house or your office gets a little dusty. And it's just kind of the stuff that's floating in the air and the ions connecting onto it, and it basically gets heavy enough that it falls out of suspension or gets brought back to your air handler. My house just got dusty after that first week and a half, go through, you know, standard cleaning of the house. And the big difference we saw was when you looked at the, like through the sunlight coming through a window, normally you could see some stuff floating, all of that was gone. So that was kind of our indication, yes, it's been working. We're seeing changes in our house. Can I definitively say that's the reason none of us got sick? No. I mean, I think my family as a whole has done a pretty good job of trying to, you know, wear a mask, stay distance, everything else. That's kind of a way to look at it without, there's no great way to test how much virus is in a given house or in a given building. So that was kind of our way to look and see what was going on. UV obviously uses UV light to kill everything in the airstream. The main thing you have to be careful of, or just know on the UV side is if you have a high airflow system, with very few systems are going to be high static pressure, extremely high flows. The UV light has to be, the air passing over the UV light has to be exposed to that light for a given amount of time for it to be effective. And depending on that length of time that the air is exposed to the UV lighting, tells you how effective the UV is at killing everything within that airstream. You know, if it's going 1,000 miles an hour past light, doesn't do a lot. If you slow it down to your standard 400, 500 feet per minute, that's where it works extremely well. Ionization, there's all different studies depending on concentration of ions and the space, everything else about how effective it is. I think at the high end, it's 99.6% after 60 minutes across, I think, all the different products pretty much that are out there, pretty much most of them. The initial effect on it, you know, there's kind of that linear, or the curve of how, you know, the first 10 minutes, there's a big drop off, maybe down to 70%, and then it slowly gets the rest of the way. Another question, someone's been using nanoseptic products. They claim they have a 90-day protection. Do you agree that that works or not?
So let me answer that kind of twofold response. Does nanoseptic technology work? Yes, we kind of already talked about that. Does it work in this application? I think the jury's still out. There is not a lot of literature. There's not a lot of research papers. There's not a lot of data to kind of substantiate the claims that they're offering. I've seen anything from 90-day to, like, you know, 6 months kind of warranties given on these products. But I just have seen no actual science-based literature to really support that in the application that we're seeing. And I also think it's kind of overkill, to be honest. You know, I think that we are really kind of promoting individual responsibilities with regards to hand washing versus trying to create this impression that you are making a sterile environment and you have sterile surfaces. We do not live in a sterile world. It's really just that simple. So I think that there is not enough information out there available to determine if it works in those applications, but they have some really great marketing materials.
Kevin, let you step in here.
Howard and all, you know, for those that need to drop off the call, go ahead. For those that seems like there's a lot of questions still coming in here in that, but so we'll stay up and running here. We still have a little under 100 folks on the call, but if there are still more questions coming up, please, we'll stay on as long as we need. Well, there's a time limit, but I mean, we'd be glad to continue answering some questions. So I'll throw it back. Howard, I think you were in the middle of saying something.
I've seen what other questions have popped through so far. One of them comes up, will the presentation be available to view again later? I think, yeah, it's being recorded, and I believe it's being posted onto the BOMA website, or a link will be sent out. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yes, that is correct, Howard. It will be on our website and sent out to everyone. So if you missed portions of it, or you want to go back to it for a refresher, that is that will be posted. Are there any other questions for that came in on just the panelist side that you can see?
I don't see anything else on the panelist side, no.
Okay, well, maybe this is a good time then to end this session. This has been terrific information, and certainly it will inspire more questions and conversations as we meander through the next weeks and months ahead as the tenants and their employees re-enter the building. So BOMA, Greater Minneapolis is very thankful, Michelle and Nick and Howard, for your contribution putting this together. And again, for those that want to go back to it, it will be on our website. It will be sent as well. And with that, I want to thank, we had well over 100 folks on this call, and we learned a lot from that. So again, Michelle, Nick, and Howard, thank you very, very much. We appreciate it. And for that, we'll see you at our annual meeting in April, everyone. Please register. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time, everybody.